This episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast is brought to you by BetUS.
Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, I am not even going to try to hide my glee here because it is not every day that we get there's only one rock star of the niche basketball podcasting world. But we have him on here today. I'm going to go with a howdy partner for, of course, ESPN's Tim MacMahon. How you doing, man?
Howdy, partners. Listen, it is a pleasure to be with you. I am a native New Yorker. I don't know if you knew that.
It's the first time I'm hearing that.
I'm like paste picante sauce, born in New York, raised in Texas, but I was born in North Tarrytown, New York.
For real? I thought you were kidding. Okay.
No, this is a fact. Born in North Tarrytown. Got to Texas as soon as possible when I was 3 years old, but that is the truth.
Tarrytown, I don't think the Knicks practice facility was up there quite yet when you were born.
Listen, the NBA was barely around when I was born. I'm old. Actually, the Knicks were pretty fresh off a championship back then. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah, well, those were the days. I'm not sure if you caught any of the residual karma coming off of the city. I mean, it was a fun time back then, or so I've heard. But I too was a little too not quite there yet. I'm going to get to, we got some NBA stuff to talk about, obviously, even though it's the middle of the dead zone. But I have to start with you because, as listeners of the show well know, I am an unabashed fan, groupie, junkie, whatever you want to call it, of the Hoop Collective. It is my favorite podcast.
Despite Bontemps, despite the USWB?
Yeah, so I'm happy you brought. I actually was on with the other Tim for an episode of the Putback with Ian Begley, your former colleague at ESPN this year, and then we did another episode with Wendy. So now I have completed the trifecta. I've gotten to talk to all three of you guys on recorded mediums, but like your back and forth. I love obviously the hoops talk is great, but your back and forth banter with Tim. Mostly, but I mean, the three of you, and the two of you with Brian I just don't think first of all, you can't fake it. And the fact that you're able to, it ties in so seamlessly with just the hoops talk. I have to ask you, when did you guys know, because obviously you've been friends before and work colleagues and everything. When did you know you had something like on your hands that was going to be a special thing?
First of all, I would certainly not agree with the whole friends thing. The animosity that I have for Bontemps is absolutely legitimate. There's no question about that. Seriously, I think the fun thing about the Hoop Collective is like it's just us talking. Like it's not, sometimes it's, hey, what are we going to talk about and that sort of thing. But it's just three guys who enjoy the NBA, despite what sometimes it might come across as,
it's obvious.
Yeah, who enjoy the conversation, just talking hoops. And, we tend to get geeky too with, the business of basketball and roster building and all that kind of stuff. But that's stuff that we enjoy talking about. And it's the most fun part of my job. I think those other two guys would agree. Obviously we're based in separate parts of the country. Bontemps seems to be at a game every single night. I'm at a lot of games. Wendy covers every single NBA game in Omaha, plus a bunch around the country as well. So I think it's a unique perspective where we're all obviously doing a lot of reporting, talking to a lot of people, seeing a lot of games, and then just 2 or 3 times a week get together and shoot the bull.
It amazes me that it's an ESPN podcast, and you guys even joked about it on the last episode about how much, I think you made the joke about how much Laker content you guys put out because it's a capitalist society, and you're kind of breaking the fourth wall there, and we all know what's going on here, but at the same time, you are able to get into the nitty gritty, and it never feels like. It's never boring. That goes without saying, but it's also, I'm an NBA nut, but I imagine a casual fan listens to you guys and enjoys it just the same. It's really rare, I think, that you find something like that. So before we talked hoops, I just had to say that because I'm just such a big fan of what you guys do.
I appreciate it. And I'll Venmo you right after we get done here.
I'll send you an invoice. Okay. You do talk about the NBA, so let's do a little bit of that. I want to get to your book in a little bit, because you do have a book coming out in March called The Wonder Boy. It is about Luka Doncic and the challenges, perhaps, of building around a player of that caliber. And over the years, covering primarily the Dallas Mavericks, there have been so many tie-ins with the Knicks. Mm-hmm. The first of which is, I think that comes to people's mind now, at least, wasn't always the case, but is Jalen Brunson. So you were there covering the Mavs when Brunson first arrived. He obviously has had a big summer, a very important summer here with the Knicks. I want to take you back 6 years ago when Jalen Brunson first arrived. What were your early memories of him arriving at the Dallas Mavericks? And when did you first start to see signs that maybe this was more than just your average second-round draft pick?
No, I mean, when he first got there, kind of the hope was that he could be the next generation's J.J. Barea, right? Which is high praise in Dallas. I mean, J.J. Barea, a guy who 2 stints in Dallas, but the vast majority of his career, a high-quality backup point guard, a key role player on their 2011 Finals team. I mean, he's always going to be royalty in Dallas. But I mean, if you can't put those two guys in the same sentence now, right? Nobody saw Jalen Brunson, despite the success he had at Villanova, being NCAA Player of the Year, a couple national championships. Nobody saw him becoming a superstar, and he is an unquestioned superstar. But he comes in, and the knock is, hey, there's not a lot of upside there, right? For a drafted player, he was on the older end, obviously not that big, not that athletic, et cetera, et cetera. All he does is gets better and better and better and better. And I mean, you saw it. He got better after establishing himself as a legitimate face of the franchise for a playoff team. He got better again. I expect him to come back better again. And, it was kind of steady. And then his third year, he was a Sixth Man of the Year candidate, right? I think he finished 4th in the Sixth Man of the Year voting. And it was like he had gotten past the, quality backup point guard of like, dude, this is a core player on a good team. Now, having said that, Game 7, his last game playing for Rick Carlisle, he played only 10 minutes and basically got the plug pulled on him, right? But boy, he chewed on that all summer, came back, and then established himself as, without doubt, the second best player on a good team, the second best player on what ended up being a Western Conference Finals team. And the main thing that happened that year with Brunson is Doncic missed a lot of time, right?
I think it was 17 games or whereabouts, or something around that.
Including the playoffs, it ended up being 20 games.
It was,
right?
Yes, with the playoffs, it was 20. Yep.
And it was a big chunk of December. And that was that weird, crazy time where the league had this massive COVID outbreak, et cetera, et cetera. But Brunson kept the Mavericks afloat during that time. And then obviously playoffs, 41 and a win, 31 and a win. And you took the 20-game sample size, a decent sample size, again, including 3 playoff games, and he was averaging 20 points and 7 assists per game over that stretch. So when a lot of people are like, oh my God, the Knicks overpaid. And I'm like, dude, what the Knicks gave him was a contract for an average starting point guard. And I was like, I think he's going to be a good starting point guard. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought he was going to be an all-star. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought he was going to be an MVP candidate. And it's funny, Rick Brunson, obviously his biggest fan. I remember sitting down with him at the team hotel in Salt Lake City. And this is the interview when right after 41 and 31. And ain't no discount. Don't tell me you love me, show me, all that kind of stuff. But it's funny because he said, hey, and it's especially funny the way things played out. He said, hey, there's not 30 Kyrie Irvings in the league. He doesn't have to be a Kyrie Irving, but he's exceeded my expectations to the point where, he's unquestionably a quality NBA starting caliber player. And now you can put him in the conversation with a Kyrie Irving, who essentially ended up replacing him in Dallas.
Man, talk about a fork in the road, and the 2 paths the Mavs could have taken. It's funny you mentioned Brunson and a capped ceiling. I am fairly certain there is still a tweet that exists from me saying that Jalen Brunson, this is before he was drafted, a nice prospect.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have anywhere near the ceiling of Frank Ntilikina. And talk about, getting high on your own supply there.
Listen, he was a second round pick, and we can go down the list of point guards that were drafted in front of him. And
I'm sure he knows
thought
them.
His rookie year, I said, hey, he's going to have a decade long career, but I thought it was going to be a workman-like decade long career. I didn't think he was going to end up getting $156 million and everybody talking about what a discount it was.
I mean, but I'm happy you brought up that stretch during his fourth season in Dallas, because you put out that masterclass of reporting on the contract situation as it existed going into that summer. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is before the free agency played out the way it
this
did.
Is during the first round.
When do you think his exit from the Mavs was sealed? I mean, do you think it was like actually free agency, or do you think it was long before that?
Well, this book that I have coming out in March, I'll tease it a little bit. There's a lot of reporting, and there's a chapter that focuses pretty heavily on this situation with insight.
Don't give it all away.
Yeah, so I'll just say this. Certainly, the night of the draft, when the Knicks made some moves, got rid of their picks and made moves to clear cap space, not the full load, but it was clear, okay, his godfather and former agent, a guy who held him in the hospital after he was born, was not clearing cap space, hoping to get Jalen Brunson, right? And, you'd heard all year long about the Knicks as a possibility. Having said that, the Mavericks had multiple opportunities to extend him at 4 years, $56 million. His agents, and essentially his dad via his agents, went to the Mavericks in early January and said, hey, if you put it on the table now, we'll take it. The Mavericks didn't do it. They wanted to hold off until the trade deadline, right? Because if there's going to be a big trade for them, a big splash trade, there's probably going to be Brunson in it and Dorian Finney-Smith. So they held off. Finney-Smith snapped that extension up right after the trade deadline, like minutes after. And Brunson was like, nah, bud, we've outplayed that thing at this point. But the one thing I'll say is, obviously, it was headed towards New York after that point, except for the Mavericks had, as Cuban kept reminding people, they had his bird rights. They could have given him a longer contract, a much bigger contract. The Mavericks made it a very easy decision by not opting to compete financially. They didn't forget trying to outbid. They didn't even come close to matching the offer. So if the Mavericks would have been aggressive with their offer, would he have stayed in Dallas? We can debate that. You can doubt that. But they didn't make him answer that.
It's so interesting. It's just a few years later, literally, it's just two years later. And I feel like not to get too into the cap nerdy stuff, but nowadays it's the idea of maintaining salary slots, so you could have a tradable piece, is I think more important than it even was 2 years ago. You look at what the Knicks just gave OG Anunoby. There was never any question the Knicks were going to do whatever it took to keep OG, because if you lose him, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to lose him, but it's interesting to me that the Mavs did not approach that situation in the same way. And again, I'm a biased Knicks fan, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but it says to me that even with 4 years of evidence, they did not see, what he became, or even have an inkling of that, because otherwise they would have paid him.
What I would say is it was not a consensus opinion. I think what you also have to remember here is this was Nico Harrison's rookie year as a general manager.
So it was.
He did not have autonomy at that point. Ultimately, this was a Mark Cuban call. If it had been Jason Kidd's call, then the extension would have been done in early January. I think if it had been Nico Harrison's call, same thing. This was a Mark Cuban call. And so, yeah, Cuban did have 4 years of full, of time to evaluate it. The other thing, and this is no secret to Jalen and Rick Brunson, the Mavericks basically shopped him from the second he got to Dallas, right
including to the Knicks on trade night. They were trying to get Halliburton. Yeah.
Well, and that's a crazy one because one, the evaluation of Halliburton was spot on, right? They had him as, and this is Bob Voulgaris, who's kind of been villainized in Dallas, but him and his analytics crew, they had Halliburton as the best player in that draft class. And so that's the year the Mavericks had, what were the picks?
14 or 17?
I was like 16. I'd have to look.
Oh, it was 17 because it was the Josh Green pick. That's what we were just
18,
talking about.
18, that's right. 18 and 31.
Sorry,
yeah.
18
right. And 31. And so they were trying to package 18, 31, and Brunson to move up for a chance to pick Halliburton. So they're offering that to everybody until Halliburton's off the board, including, of course, the New York Knicks, who snatched up your guy Ntilikina with all that high ceiling, all that upside.
No, that was Obi. That was the Obi. Right. You're a few years up on Ntilikina.
And it's funny because that's Leon Rose, and the hilarious thing about that is both franchises would have been better off, right?
Oh yeah,
because the Mavericks would have had a bona fide co-star for Luka, and maybe I don't know. We can argue about the fit of Halliburton and Luka, and both.
That'd be interesting.
I think. Well, put it this way: I think the fit of Luka and Brunson was pretty damn good. I do think there was appeal for Brunson of being able to have the ball full time, of being able to run the show instead of being the number 2 guy who runs a second unit. And then the Knicks would have extended Brunson at 4 years, 56. Now maybe he doesn't take the $113 million discount on his next deal, but and that's not the only time they shot Brunson. Again, the big part of not extending him in his final year here was to have the option to trade him before the deadline, which, dude, that's pretty short-term thinking, because how valuable of a trade chip would he have been on that extension moving forward? And the funny thing is, if Brunson signs that extension with Dallas, I think there is a high likelihood that he would be with the Brooklyn Nets right now.
Whoa. Okay. Sure.
Because, listen, Mark Cuban has always been about chasing stars. And, Kyrie was going to become available the next season, as he did. At the time, the Mavericks did because they needed a star to replace Brunson. But I think they would have looked at that as an upgrade. And I think now, maybe they probably keep Dorian Finney-Smith in that case. Maybe they don't have to give up a first-round pick, whatever. But I think there's a pretty decent chance that Jalen Brunson would have been moved to Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving still ended up in Dallas. It's one of those things where we will never know. But, Brunson obviously landed in a much better situation for himself from a basketball, life, all sorts of different perspectives. Financial.
You could say. I mean, yes, he gave up a lot of money with this contract that he signed, but
but the first deal he signed was worth almost twice as much as what the extension would have been.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think he'll, with the player option and, he could make it up on the back end. And New York has been known to have some modicum of opportunities for off-court income.
And as he pointed out during his recent press conference, he's still pretty well off. Like, at $156 million, I'm not quite sure where he's living, but I bet you he's making his mortgage payment without too much sweat.
Very true. Quick break to tell you about our new friends from BetUS. Are you looking for a new book this basketball season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, 200% crypto deposit bonus. Fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Check out my BetUS link in the description below. You get 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business. You get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And did you know that BetUS can give you your very own personal account manager? How about that? Okay. I'm going to bring up Andrew Claudio here because we are going to look at some current NBA odds. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm okay. I don't know if you know this, but the NBA released the game schedule for all the in-season tournament games. So we know, for instance, when the Knicks are going to be playing the Hornets, Nets, Sixers, and Magic for their in-season tournament games. We're going to pick in-season tournament cup winners right now. I am looking at the odds here, which you can see as well. I don't like the Boston Celtics at plus 425 because KP is not going to probably play in any of those games. Some of these other teams, I'm not sure if the motivation is quite going to be there. Mavs just made the finals, Nuggets, recent NBA champion. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to pick the Knicks at plus 1,000. Those are tied for the fourth best odds. You know that Tom Thibodeau is going to be motivated to win every game his team plays. So why not? New York Knicks plus 1,000.
Love it. The defending champs of the NBA Cup, the NBA in-season tournament, are plus 2,600. So this may just be the thing that LeBron wins for the rest of his career. I like those odds a lot. You got to go with the defending Western Conference champions as well, especially since we just had Tim MacMahon on the pod. Shout out to Dallas. They're plus 1,800. I'm tired of you doubting Luka Doncic, John Macri. Plus 1,800 for the Dallas Mavericks. I just love the value bet there.
Okay. I think those are two pretty good bets. Again, presented by BetUS. Use the link in the description and get 125% deposit bonus up to $2,000 for your first 3 deposits. Gambling involves risks. Please only gamble with funds that you can afford to lose. All forms of betting carry financial risk, and it is down to the individual to make bets with or without the assistance of information provided. Speaking of Dallas, another very notable Knick is from the Dallas area, and he is up. He has been up for, what day is it? For about 2 weeks for an extension. That, of course, is Julius Randle. I think, like a lot of Knick fans, Julius Randle is an object of fascination for me because I feel like he's one of these guys that obviously, his talent is obvious. His accolades are even obvious. He's made 2 All-NBA teams. Could argue maybe he would end up on a 3rd this year had he stayed healthy. And yet there is, I feel like, not only amongst a lot of Knick fans, but around the league, listening to you guys talk, listening to other people who cover the sport talk, a skepticism about if he is one of your top players, how far can you get? And what I want to ask you, because the Knicks had that wonderful run in January, 14 games. Randle looked like he was really buying in, doing all the things that you need him to do. Do you think around the league, people are looking at Randle now with the Knicks as a situation like, okay, he seems like he's still capable of not more, but like, let's see what he looks like in this environment. It's the best situation he's ever been in. Or do you think that there is more skepticism, as in terms of, like, we've seen some of the ups and downs in recent years, and maybe that factors into why the Knicks may be thinking, okay, we're not in a rush to extend him just yet?
Well, I think there's always going to be skepticism until he performs in the playoffs at the kind of levels that he has during the regular season. And, he's kind of got a funky game for this era, right? Where he's a playmaking power forward with an inconsistent 3-point shot. And then defensively, there are some challenges for him. Like he's not a guy who you're comfortable really switching on the perimeter with. He's a very talented player who has a lot of imperfections, I think, would be the way to put it. But, like, dude, there's not a whole lot of guys you can plug in and expect to get, 25 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists on a fairly consistent basis. I get that he's polarizing. But again, he's a big time talent. And I think if you're looking at that roster, like last year in the playoffs, man, there are times where you just needed somebody else who could create,
Desperately. They missed him.
Yeah, he is without question the second best creator on that roster.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of hope that what, again, we saw in January, and now, of course, they're adding Mikal Bridges, that can translate seamlessly to this year. I know the East Coast is more Bontemps thing, but you know the league as well as anyone. When you look at the East this season, putting Boston aside, they're going to be in the category, even with KP's. I mean, what's your over under for how many games the ex Mav and ex Nick plays this year?
I would say certainly I wish KP well. I hope it's a speedy recovery. And his track record is that I would anticipate that his return would be in 2025, in the 2025 part of the calendar. I think that KP will rightfully take a cautious approach. He is. I've talked to him about the last year under Carlisle, his last full season in Dallas. What a disaster that was for KP, and there was a lot of things there. He was absolutely miserable playing for Rick. Him and Luka weren't, on the same page that whole year. I mean, there was massive dysfunction in the franchise. But one of the things KP feels like is he rushed back from that meniscus surgery and never really was fully healthy until he went and stood in the corner in the first round of the playoffs. And so I think given that experience, he's going to want to make sure that he really feels right and healthy before he's back on the floor. And obviously the Celtics, with all the talent they have, there's not a need to rush him back. And even if it's a situation where, it might cost them being a number 1 seed or 2 seed or whatever, they need him right for the playoffs more than they need him to be back in late December or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's staggering to think that the Mavs essentially treated him as a salary dump,
Oh, no, dude. The Mavericks threw a second-round pick into the deal to take on 2 contracts the Wizards wanted to unload. I mean, it was the epitome of a salary dump.
Yeah, we're not going to go too deep. Well, actually, I'll touch on the Mavs later, so I'll hold off on that. So even with the KP injury, put Boston aside, how do you personally look at where the East stacks up after the defending champs?
Man, it's going to be competitive. And I think there are 3 teams that you could make a case as being the biggest challengers to the Celtics. The Knicks are one of them, right? I mean, obviously the Nova Knicks and the group they've put together, knock on wood that Mitchell Robinson can stay healthy. Obviously, they really need him to give them that defensive anchor and rebounder and, be a lead blocker essentially for Brunson. The Bucks were massive disappointments last year, but I still think you have to give them respect. Of Giannis is a perennial MVP candidate. I would think Dame would be more comfortable, going into his second year, full training camp, all that kind of thing. Obviously, Doc Rivers, I don't want to hear from him how hard his job is this year. You've got a full off season. You've got a full camp. Oh, okay. He can say it all he wants. You're getting paid a lot of money. You've got 2 All-NBA type of talents. One's a perennial MVP candidate. You've got all the time to put together, you've had time to put together your staff, your training. Anyways, I think the Bucks got to be considered there. Then obviously the Sixers. Embiid's health is always going to be a question mark, but Bontemps blabs to everybody who will listen how they've got the best big 3 in the NBA, and this is one of those rare occasions where he might actually be right about something.
The take does not make me popular amongst Knicks fans, but even after last season, you know what? More so after the playoffs, I have a lot of respect for Philly, and in particular for Tyrese Maxey. You want to talk about a guy who showed something. You know, a lot of people have been having some fun doing rosters for the 2028 Olympics. Like at this point, I wouldn't rule out Maxey. You know, with 4 years to go.
By the way, another Dallas area native. We talked about that draft with the Halliburton in there. What do you go, 2021 in that draft?
You want to talk about, again, crazy what ifs? If the Knicks pull off that trade where they would trade down, they could have taken Maxey, which is, again, reading the tea leaves, allegedly a guy that Worldwide West, we wanted either him or Quickly. It didn't matter which one it was, but
yeah, that would have worked out pretty well too, having Brunson and Maxey.
I would take those two. A couple more, and then I'm gonna get you out of here. I just had your colleague Bobby Marks on a couple weeks ago, and I asked him what was his reaction when he saw the Mikal Bridges trade, just because it was such a stunning piece of news. So I'll just ask you the same thing. When you saw that, the two teams who hadn't traded since 1883 had made a deal, and then the return for Bridges, what was your reaction? I
mean, the initial reaction is, Brunson and Hart and DiVincenzo, they finally have completed it, right? They finally got their guy to cross the river. So that's the initial reaction. And then I think he's going to be a great fit in New York. I think he was overtaxed being the primary option offensively in Brooklyn. But as far as a number 3 offensive option and a phenomenal defensive player, dude, that's who he is. And I think he's going to be a great fit for the Knicks. And then if it works out as well as I think it will, and for as long as I think it will, because I do think, especially that's part of the deal with Brunson is, why do you give up all that money? Well, part of it's because you want to keep this thing together for a long, long time. So if I think it fits as well as I believe it will and lasts as long as it is, then I don't necessarily think that the cost will be that massive. In other words, I think a lot of those picks will be in the 20s. Now, there's been a lot of trades in the past where that was kind of the belief, and whoops, it flew up in their face. And Brooklyn's been on the wrong end of a couple of those. 5 picks is a lot for what I'm going to say is a star complementary player, which kind of sounds like a contradiction, but you know what I'm saying.
I agree with you.
5 picks is a lot, but I think it was a price worth paying given the fit, and also kind of an acknowledgement of, hey, there's not that superstar who's going to be available, right? Luka for a while looked like maybe it was him, and I'm not sure if that would have been a fit in New York anyways. Giannis, we'll see about that, but they decided it wasn't worth waiting around on. The Embiid thing, at this time last year, we thought that was a pretty distinct possibility, and then obviously give credit to Daryl Morey. He salvaged that situation in Philadelphia. And then, would you rather have Karl Anthony Towns on that contract or Bridges on this contract? I think we can make a pretty strong argument for Bridges. In other words, for so much of this last year, a lot of the discussion about the Knicks, aside from the success they had on the court, was, hey, what superstar can they get to kind of complete that puzzle? And it ended up being, it's not worth waiting around on the superstar when, they threw their picks into the pot to go get Bridges.
Yeah, and it's clearly a vote of faith in Jalen Brunson and what he's capable of doing, specifically, when the calendar turns to April and May and hopefully June. I like to say one day before I die, just once. Let the Knicks play basketball in June. Okay, let's finish with this. So you teased it a little bit before. You have a book coming out in March. It is called The Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness. I love that title because it kind of gives an inkling into where you're going with this. Over the past several years, to the point of my lovely producer, Andrew, makes fun of me for it, I'm pretty high on Luka. I have mentioned his name in the same sentence as Michael Jordan. He gives you the warm and fuzzies as a basketball fan when you're watching. So, we were talking off air before you came on. And you mentioned, the last time I saw the Knicks play, or in Dallas, I think Luka put up 60 and 20 and 10 or whatever he did. He is a special talent. I'm going to ask you this and encourage people to pre-order the book when the time comes, and we'll have you back on after the book comes out to talk more about it. But we're now, not even halfway through Luka's career. Let's say a third of the way through Luka's career, what he hopes is going to be a long career. Do you think his career has met expectations so far? If you asked him, and just your opinion, your own take, do you think it's met expectations?
I think if you ask him, he would say he hadn't won a championship yet, and he'd want to shut down that conversation, right? Now, has it met expectations? Yes. I mean, listen, he came over as the most accomplished European team prospect ever, right? But there were massive question marks about Luka. There's a reason the Mavericks were able to get him despite having the 5th pick in that draft. It took 3 teams passing on him, right? It took the Suns, who had just hired Igor Koshkov, who coached Luke on the Slovenian national team, but they didn't want to hear his opinion on who should be the number 1 overall pick. They'd take Ayton. Vlade Divac, who is a Balkan basketball legend and has known Luka's dad forever, knows the European hoop scene as well as anybody. No, he didn't. He thought Marvin Bagley III clearly a better talent, is what he said. And then the Hawks, if they'd have stayed put, they'd have taken Luka over Trae Young. But they're like, ooh, hold on, we can get a second lottery pick out of this deal. Yep, that's worth it. And look, man, when Luka came into the league, there were a lot of people who thought he was some kind of finished product. Oh, he's been with Real Madrid for whatever it was, 5 or 6 years. There's just not a lot of upside, not that athletic. His game's already so polished. How much better can he get? Can he play point? He's not a point guard in the NBA. He can't bring the ball up the floor. I mean, there's a lot of those kind of questions. And, not only can he play point guard in the NBA, but he can put up numbers in some cases that we've never seen before. So has he met expectations of what he could be coming into the NBA? I would say he's blown by those.
I think that's a fair answer. I don't root for anybody other than the Knicks, but I was pulling for him in the playoffs last year for sure. And I think of everybody in the NBA right now, personally, other than maybe Wemby, I'm most curious to see what do the next 5 to 10 years look like for Luka? Because I'm biased. I think I've always been sold on him. I think he could wind up as one of the 5 to 10 greatest players ever if he keeps going.
No, he's got a chance. I mean, you're talking about a 5-time first-team All-NBA selection who's played 6 years in the league and is still 25 years old.
Yes.
And look, for him to accomplish all the goals and all the things that are required to be in that conversation, obviously it takes an organization around him, a franchise around him. And that's a lot of what this book is. When you draft that kind of prodigy, and the Mavericks thought he was that kind of player, and they were right. But there's pressure that comes along with it. You've got to position yourself or your franchise to cash in on all that, or there's risk of, what we've seen so many times of at a certain point, if you don't win with these superstars, they'll look for greener pastures. And it's been a pretty fascinating ride for the Mavericks. And there's been a lot of dysfunction along the way. But think about the last couple of years. And by the way, this book got pushed back a year. Whew. Thank you for that. Because could you imagine if it had come out last year and it would have been an open-ended ending, but based on the way, they're tanking to keep the top 10 protected pick from the failed Porzingis trade, and that's the way. Versus, okay, hey, they broke through and went on this finals run. That just shows you how much the narrative can shift in a year. I mean, it went from this thing's going down to whoop, they're cruising along, and oh hey, the Mavericks finally won a free agency battle and got what they hope is the finishing piece in Klay Thompson.
Yeah. I'm excited to watch Klay. I'm excited to watch Quentin Grimes. Also, I could see him being out of the rotation. I could see him closing games for them. But look, the Mavs may have had some errors along the way when they had a chance to decide, should we move forward with the franchise, with Luka Doncic or Dennis Smith Jr.? They chose correctly.
I would say that they chose that as the name was being passed to Adam Silver on draft night. I mean, that honestly, that wasn't a difficult. And you know what? Obviously, Dennis didn't work out here in Dallas. Didn't work out in New York. I do want to give Dennis Smith Jr. credit. I thought he got a raw deal in Dallas. First of all, not that he was going to live up to potential face of the franchise lottery type of talent, but he wasn't treated well here. I want to give him credit to scrapping to put together what's been a solid NBA career. And I think he can help a team because he has established himself as legitimately a damn good on-ball defender. And there's a lot of teams that could use that kind of guy. Plus, he's a good dude.
If you would have told me several years ago that he was going to resuscitate his career with defense, I would have never in a million years believed you. And that's exactly what he said. Yeah, no, he does seem like a good dude and hope he catches on somewhere. Tim MacMahon, I have kept you for way too long. Again, the name of the book, The Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness, coming out in March. I am already looking forward to this thing. I love nothing more than a great NBA book. And I know that this is going to be a great one. The last thing I'll say to you, if you have any pull whatsoever, more Windy sleep updates. I want an entire
you don't have to ask me. You don't have to ask me. All you got to do is set his alarm. He'll let you know.
and more stories about labs off their leash, almost ruining television shoots. Great stuff. Honor to have you on, and thanks for giving us the time.
Well, I appreciate you. Looking forward to doing this again. Adios, amigos.
Thank you for tuning in to the Knicks Film School Podcast. This episode was once again presented by BetUS.